Hey everyone, welcome back to another week of the Triple Play. This is your host, Danielle, once again. This week, I am joined by a veteran of the show. I guess you could call her a veteran. I'm going to call her a veteran. We have Emily, and then we have a new guy on the staff now. We have Morgan, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But like I said, Emily, it's kind of like a welcome back for you.
Yep, I'm back again. You get to listen to more of me.
And then Morgan.
Hi, my name's Morgan. I'm a freshman here at Tennessee. Sports journalism major. I hope to work for ESPN or Fox Sports one day, or God willing, have my own brand.
Nice. Well, I'm very happy to have you on the show. It's nice to have new people on the Triple Play. And so, you know what? Let's just go ahead and dive right in. There's no football this week. It's heartbreaking. A lot of us are sad. I'm sad. But it's okay. We have basketball, and it's getting into the best time of year for basketball. Maybe not for Tennessee fans, but you know, this is a great time. March Madness is coming up very, very soon, but let's just go ahead and talk about the men Vols really quick. They split games this past week, losing to Missouri on Saturday, 75-64, in a very tough loss with a team that had only had one win in the SEC before this game. And they were on, a 9-game losing streak, something like that. It's hard to think about. So let's think about the happier times whenever the Vols beat Auburn last Tuesday with a score of 71-45 in a great game by the Vols. I think this is one they'd been looking forward to in terms of finding new leaders on the scoring routes. And we're going to look at Robert Hubbs the third. He had 20 points with 5 rebounds, and Devin Balkman also had a very good game, 14 points, 1 rebound, with 4 assists. But the most surprising stat line of this game was Kevin Punter with a season low of 4 points. The last time he had single-digit scoring was beginning of the season, I want to say against San Diego State. I might be wrong on that, but he had 9 points in that game. So he comes off of a game where he had 24 points, I want to say, dips down to 4 points, and then comes back to get 21 points against Missouri. But looking at this, I mean, it could have been much different. Auburn did not have Kareem Canty for a second game, and he's the Tigers' leading scorer. So how much different could this have been if Kareem was in the game for the Tigers? Could we have still seen Robert Hubbs being the leading scorer, or would it just have changed everything about this game?
I think if Kareem were in the game, I think we still would have won. Because if you look at the final score, it was such a big difference that I just think the Vols were. Robert Hubbs was on fire, honestly. And even with Kevin Punter not having his best game, and those 2 fouls he had right in the beginning really hurt
Definitely.
him. I mean, that was the main reason he had to sit down. So I think that the Vols we have such a home court advantage, and it's just like they are on fire every time we play at home. And that's just, I think it's the crowd has something to do with it. And if you looked, I mean, with the Missouri loss, we're not near as good on the road. So I think that was just the Vols' night. I think we'd had a really good game. Everyone looked really well, and so I don't think it would have made that much of a difference if Kareem were there.
I think Kevin would have scored more points had Kareem played, because the last time that we played Auburn on the road, it was every guy was trying to one-up each other. I don't know if you remember, but Kareem would pull up from the logo at midcourt, and then Kevin would answer with a couple nice drives. I think that Emily is absolutely right. The home crowd would have been even more into it, because without Kareem, there wasn't much to watch in terms of when Auburn had the basketball.
That's true, and Bruce Pearl pretty much summed it up at the end of the game in his press conference, saying something along the lines of that this was the worst shooting game he has seen for Auburn this season. And I think that really says a lot for this Auburn team, because going into this game, something we talked about last week on the show, this team can shoot, and that was one thing to be looking out for in this game. But definitely having Kareem not playing for the Tigers, that really kind of slowed down momentum, I think. But it was great going back to the Vols to see somebody else that wasn't Kevin Punter putting up big points. And like you said, Emily, Robert was hot. There's no other way to look at it. He just had the mojo going into this game. He even said that his mind was in the right place for it. So it was a very good showing for the Vols. But coming up for the remainder of the season, they still have some big games coming up, especially this week. This might be the biggest week for Tennessee basketball that we're going to see in terms of the opponents they're taking on. They are taking on the 2 top teams of the SEC with Kentucky and LSU. Kentucky, they will be traveling to Lexington to take on Kentucky Tuesday night. And, I mean, that's going to be Kentucky's going to be looking at it as a retribution game after taking a loss to the Vols, a hard loss, too, in Knoxville. So it's going to be really interesting in Lexington. That's going to be Tuesday, 7 o'clock on ESPN, and then the Vols will come back to Thompson Bowling Arena to host LSU on Saturday, and that game will be on ESPNU at 5:30. So between these two games, the two top teams in the SEC right now for the men's side, which game do you view as having the higher stakes going into having the SEC tournament coming up in less than a month, and the season's just really winding down? If the Vols are going to get wins, it has to be maybe both of these games, but definitely one of them. So which one has the bigger stakes?
I think Kentucky does, because if we get a win at Kentucky, I think that gives them so much motivation to go in and beat LSU. You know, like I said earlier, we're not that good on the road. We're not near as good as we are at home, which is, I mean, you see that with everybody, but our home court advantage is crazy. So I think if we go to Kentucky, beat them again, which is just, I mean, it's Kentucky. Everyone loves to beat Kentucky. If we get a win at Kentucky, then we can come back, and I think we can really take on LSU. So I think the Kentucky game, if we win that, we have a much better chance of beating LSU. So that's the higher stakes for me.
I personally think LSU is the higher stakes because Kentucky, you've already beaten them once. I think that you can take motivation from that. If you split 1-1 with Kentucky, I think any Vol fan would be happy with that. I think any Vol player would be happy with that, and I'm absolutely sure that Rick Barnes would be happy with that, knowing what he was getting into this season. The LSU game, it's a team that, despite being the top team right now in the conference, is still on the NCAA bubble. This is a team that is not quite as good as Kentucky, and I think it'd be disappointing for the team to, even if they got the second win at Kentucky, to go home and lose to LSU, a team that is not as good as Kentucky per se, even though they have beaten Kentucky.
Yeah, I think looking at it for me, it really comes back to the home team. I would say that home court advantage has been big for the Vols. That's definitely something we've talked about a lot on this show already. But I think if we're going to go with one that has higher stakes, getting a win in Lexington, in Rupp Arena, in front of all of those fans, I feel like that could be the momentum turner for the Vols with the rest of the season. Yes, it will help them to potentially beat LSU this weekend, but I just look at winning in Rupp as having the most stakes, not just for the game against LSU, but for the rest of the season too.
Because the rest of the games are all SEC games.
Exactly.
So if we want to get into the tournament, then we have to be really, really good for the rest of the month. And I think, like you said, going to Kentucky and taking a win there with all those, I mean, Kentucky basketball fans are crazy.
They're everywhere.
I would love to see Kentucky lose at home against the Vols. That would make my life. So to me, I understand that everyone would be happy splitting with Kentucky, but at the same time, everyone would be a whole lot happier if you beat Kentucky both times.
Yeah, that's true.
Take down the great Wildcats. Oh, I hate them.
I mean, they're not as strong this season as most people would think, and that's really tough to think with a Calipari team like this. I mean, going into the season, you had a lot of players go into the draft. That's the storyline for Kentucky basketball every single year. But this is a team that's beatable, and that's something that Kentucky is not used to having, especially after the past few years. So this game, I think it's going to be a very big one. It's a great game for it to be, on ESPN for a big Tuesday matchup. It's going to be fun. That's all I can think about. Hopefully it'll be fun for the Vols and the Vol fans, but no matter what, I mean, Kentucky, even if you don't like them or anything, they are a fun team to watch whenever they're hot.
They're dynamic.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's fun to watch them, but it's also so much more fun to beat them.
That's true. But like I mentioned, the SEC tournament is coming up March 9th through the 13th in Nashville, so Vol fans won't have to travel too far if the Vols do make it in. Right now, they'll probably make it in, but who knows how far they will make it. That's the question mark. We'll be discussing that much, much more in the coming weeks. But let's go ahead and shift our focus over to the Lady Vols. They traveled to Nashville this past Thursday to take on Vanderbilt and picked up the win 69-51, avoiding the first ever 6-game road losing streak, which would have been big if that happened, especially in the state of Tennessee. Losing to Vanderbilt on Vanderbilt's home court, that's not where you really want to lose.
No.
And Jamie Nard had quite possibly one of the best games that I've seen from her in her career. But she had 18 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Very good showing for her. And this was a very good recovery game for the Lady Vols after coming off of a tough overtime loss to Texas A&M a few nights before. So could this game, I mean, I know there was an 18-point differential, but do you think it could have been a much bigger win for the Lady Vols? Or did you kind of predict the 18-point win?
I don't know. The Lady Vols are so unpredictable. It's just, I feel like the 18 points, I think I kind of expected that. I don't know. Going to Vanderbilt, that's just a weird gym, honestly. Their gym is just odd. I don't like it. And I don't know. I felt like that was an expected game. I didn't think they were going to totally blow them out of the water.
Right.
And I didn't think it was going to be a close game. That was a good point differential for me. I felt like that was expected.
Yeah, like you said, the Lady Vols are hard to predict, but I kind of figured what you thought. I thought it was going to be probably around 15 or 16. I mean, this is not a terrible Vanderbilt team. This is a Vanderbilt team that not too long ago went to Kentucky and beat them by a couple points.
That's true.
But they were coming off a losing streak themselves, and they've got a tough close to the rest of the season. Well, the Lady Vols, say what you want about their performance against these teams, but they have been through a gauntlet of opponents, which actually should help them in the future and hopefully help them tonight against South Carolina. Given that they've already played so many of the top teams in the country, they should be battle tested and ready tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Looking ahead at the game tonight against South Carolina, the new rankings were just put out this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, for the women's. And South Carolina moved from number 2 down to number 3. Yes, they fell, but not that much. They are still one of the best teams in the nation, and they could honestly win out the rest of the season. They could take the tournament. They could go extremely far in the NCAA tournament as well, not just the SEC. They'll win the SEC. That's pretty much a given. But this team, it's going to be a very, very tough game for Tennessee. Tennessee's going to be going into this game ranked 24. They were at 25 last week. So they're just extending their weeks in the rankings, which I don't remember the stat that I saw last week, the number specifically, but they have the longest streak, I want to say, in all of college basketball. So that's really interesting, and it's really good for them. But the game tonight, it's going to be tough for the Lady Vols to win this one, especially, with the way they've played all season. They've been up and down. They've been inconsistent, but this game, if they win against South Carolina, I definitely think it could change the whole season around. And South Carolina, they're 23-1, 11 wins. They're undefeated in the SEC right now. So obviously it's not going to be an easy matchup, but you guys have already alluded to it. It's not going to be that close of a game. It's probably going to be a blowout. I hate to say that.
Yeah, as much as it hurts to say that, but that South Carolina team is so good. And I think it will be maybe a little bit better since it's at home. And the Lady Vols fans, they're crazy too. Those people are dedicated to their Lady Vols. And so I think it's going to help being at home, so maybe that'll, kind of cushion the blow a little bit. Maybe it won't be as bad.
That's true.
But I pray they can, make some kind of run and do something crazy, but they're just so good, South Carolina is. So it's just kind of it's like David and Goliath at this point,
That's true. That's very true.
Hopefully we can be David and win.
Let me play devil's advocate here. I tend to agree. I think a couple of you guys have already said, pretty much alluded to it not being close. But South Carolina is coming off a game in which they are run off their home court by the best team in the country. And it was a game they were all hyped and excited for, that emotional energy going into the game, thinking that they had finally arrived as a program, that this could be the defining moment for our program to take down UConn. That is the ultimate Goliath in this sport. And then getting pretty badly beat down. I think the final score was only a 10-point differential, but it was worse than that. And they just got run off their home court. And the fact that they have to come here to a hostile environment, coming off that emotional high, and the Lady Vols are talented enough. There's a reason this team was a preseason number 4. That's talented enough. We have the tradition. We've got the fans. We've got the resources. We can pull the upset. It's just a question of it's got to be a perfect storm with the Lady Vols doing something they haven't done all year, which is beat a top team, even though they've come close, and South Carolina emotionally where they are.
Well, they did just beat Florida. South Carolina's women just beat Florida after the UConn loss. So, and Florida's ranked 16th. So, that's got to give them a little bit more of their confidence back. And Florida's a good team. So I think that's a good point with UConn, but at the same time, they just picked up a win, so I feel like that'll kind of help them bring their confidence back. And it's a ranked win.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
That's true. And I mean, for them to lose to UConn like they did, 66-54, and then go right back into SEC play, I mean, they didn't show any soreness whatsoever in that game against Florida, still getting the win 86-71 there. So I don't know, but looking at the Lady Vols with what they have left for the remainder of the season, you want to say it could be a good road for them, but it's not going to be an easy one. They have South Carolina tonight at 7 o'clock, and then they have Ole Miss, LSU, Alabama, Georgia the rest of the way. So, I mean, these are teams that the Vols have fared pretty well against them. I mean, they beat Alabama earlier on. Georgia, I want to say this is the first matchup against Georgia for the season. But, it's just looking at Alabama, they did beat Alabama 70-42, but Alabama's the kind of team that can turn around. They are really like that with men's, but in women's, they can do the same thing. A lot of people just don't really watch Alabama. Whenever it comes to the women, they are really low in the SEC rankings, but I just feel like that's a game to look forward to. But looking ahead at the SEC tournament, too, for the Lady Vols, the SEC tournament will be taking place March 2nd through the 6th in Jacksonville. And as of right now, I mean, the Lady Vols look to be pretty much a shoo-in to get in. They're still in the middle of the pack, the upper middle of the pack, I should say, for the SEC. So we'll see what happens there. Ahead of them, they have South Carolina, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Auburn, Florida, and Georgia. So it's still kind of up in the air right now with what could happen for the Lady Vols the rest of the way. But nonetheless, it should be very interesting. But speaking of very interesting is the fact that baseball season, it starts Friday. Just let that sink in for a second. That's incredible.
I love baseball.
It's a lot of fun, especially last year with the Vols. They had a pretty good showing. Not too bad of a year for Vols baseball. They were 24-26 with a record of 11-18 in the SEC. So, I mean, we've definitely seen stronger performances throughout a season for the Vols, but this will be Coach Serrano's 5th year on Rocky Top, I should say. So you expect to see a lot out of this team. I want to say they had around 6 or 7 guys get drafted in this past draft class for the MLB, so you're going to be seeing some new faces come in, but there's a lot of potential with this team, I think. Their season starts this Friday as the Vols travel to Chattanooga to take on Memphis in a 3-game series. Then they'll be going on the road for another series, the Grand Canyon Classic, which will be taking place February 26th through February 28th, And then the first home game will be against Cincinnati on March 2nd. That's going to be at 3 o'clock, but we'll preview that later on this month. But Tennessee baseball, I mean, like I said, last season they were around 500, a little bit below. But you expect this team to have a lot of potential this season, especially in the SEC. I mean, they were only 11-18 last year, but we could be seeing maybe a turning point for the Vols. I mean, this is, like I said, Serrano's 5th year here, so who knows what's going to happen. Do you guys have any previews or things that you're looking forward to whenever it comes to Vols baseball this year?
I just hope we have a better year than last year. Like you said, we were about 500, but I just want to see something more dynamic happen. I feel like with it being his 5th year, he's had time to really get his feet under him and get a lot of good recruiting classes in here. So hopefully that we can do something really cool this year in the SEC with baseball. I'm excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does with this team, because I think overall spread across the talent is maybe not as deep as it has been in years past. But at the top end, the talent is absolutely top notch and elite. We got a couple players that are going to be top 10, top 15 picks in the draft. But this will be the defining year for him, in my opinion. This is what we'll judge him on. I mean, look what he accomplished in his 7 years over in California with UCI and Cal State Fullerton. He hasn't come anywhere close to matching that here.
Absolutely.
But I think that with his coaching pedigree, with the ability he has shown in the past to coach, it's going to be really interesting. I think this is a Tennessee team that could quietly make some noise. The schedule definitely permits so.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, looking ahead, this is still way far in advance, but they're going to be opening up SEC play, I should say, against Alabama, and that's going to be towards the end of March in Tuscaloosa. They're going to be starting off with Ole Miss at home. starting March 18th. So there's still a while before we have to talk about SEC play, and SEC baseball is always so much fun. It's a lot to keep up with. I'll give it that, because there's so many changing points and so many dynamic teams. But to start off SEC play against Ole Miss, I think that's pretty fair, and that should be a really good matchup. But like I said, we still have quite a while before we have to talk about that. But we can go ahead and start talking about Tennessee softball, which is in full swing, and I'm sorry for the terrible pun, but it's too perfect to pass up. So Vols softball is back. Like I said, they are currently ranked number 8 in the nation. They finished up the I want to say it's the Kajikawa. I think that's the way it's pronounced. I might be saying that one wrong, but the Kajikawa Classic. They finished that up. They ended up going 4-2 in that series. They played teams like Creighton, BYU, Fresno State, San Jose State, and Northwestern. But one thing to highlight was that they did lose pretty interesting upset. I mean, Arizona State is a good team, but they lost to Arizona State. Arizona State's ranked number 22. Lost to them in 8 innings with a score of 5-4. But West Coast teams, whenever it comes to softball, they're always so good. So that's not really something to be completely surprised by. But Arizona State's definitely a team you could be watching out for the rest of the season. But that was a good showing for Tennessee softball out in Tempe, Arizona for that classic. And so they are going to be playing again in Clearwater, Florida, coming up this upcoming weekend, the 19th, 20th, and 21st. So could be a good showing for the Vols there. They'll be playing teams like James Madison, Oklahoma State, Fordham, USF, and DePaul. And then they will be opening up home play here in Knoxville against Dayton on February 25th. But we'll preview that during the next show. But looking at what they did last season, probably one of the best seasons I've seen with Tennessee softball in quite a while. They went to they made their seventh trip, to the Women's College World Series, and they had a pretty good showing. They lost to Florida and Auburn to send them out of it, just packing their bags to come back to Rocky Top. But they finished the season 47-17, 15-9 in the SEC. So there's a lot of potential with this Tennessee softball team, as there is every single year. They're definitely one of the better ones in the conference. But, I mean, you can't pass up how much fun it is to see Tennessee softball doing well, especially last season.
I think last season us doing so well really got more people to care about Lady Vols softball, and that's an awesome thing to see. So I think this year, with that great season they had last year, going into this year, I really think they're going to carry that with them and carry the support of Vol Nation with them, because I know a whole lot more people are more interested in Vol softball now because of what they did last year. So hopefully that they can carry that with them and we can see another great season this year.
I mean, I love that they're getting as much attention as they are now. I was on the bandwagon, the hype train last spring when they went on that magical run that they did, and it's great. I absolutely love to see that, because the weeklies might be some of the best coaches. I'm not just talking about softball, but best coaches Tennessee's ever had at any sport, and it's absolutely great to see them finally getting the attention they deserve.
I agree, and I mean, looking at players last year like Rainey Gaffin, you can't just look at her and say, oh, she's an okay player. She's one of the best players that Tennessee's ever had. And she talked so highly about the team that she had last year and all of her interviews that she's done. So I look to see her having another big year this year. She's definitely one of the best players, if not the best player that Tennessee has on their roster right now. And she'll definitely go up into the ranks of being one of the best players to go down in Tennessee softball history. I think that's a given. But looking, like I said, last season they were 47-17, 15-9 in SEC play. So they're already 4-2. Not too bad of a showing for the beginning of the season against teams that are out on the West Coast. So it'll be interesting once we get into SEC play for Tennessee softball and for Tennessee baseball. It's just good to have diamond play back on Rocky Top. But that's all that we had for the show this week. Join us next week as we continue to talk about Tennessee basketball as we get closer to the SEC tournament and March Madness. And then we will be talking even more in depth about Tennessee baseball, Tennessee softball, and we might even do a preview with some of the MLB stuff coming up, since spring training will also be starting, I want to say, this week. That's incredible. Might be next week. But we'll definitely look into that a little bit more next week. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.